Miles Davis looked his student straight in the eye and said the cruelest thing a teacher can say: "You'll never be good enough." The kid was 19 years old, and those words shattered him. But what Miles did next, and what that student became, created one of the most controversial teaching methods in music history. It was a cold February evening in 1978 in Miles Davis's brownstone on West 77th Street in Manhattan. The living room was thick with cigarette smoke and tension. Sitting on the couch, clutching his trumpet case like a life preserver, was Marcus Webb, a 19-year-old music student from Philadelphia who just played what he thought was the audition of his life. Marcus had been obsessed with Miles Davis since he was 12 years old. He'd learned every solo, memorized every album, studied every interview. When his professor at Berklee College of Music had arranged this private audition with Miles, Marcus had barely slept for a week. This was his chance, his one shot to impress his idol, and maybe, just maybe, get invited to play with the legend. For the audition, Marcus had prepared a flawless rendition of So What, one of Miles's most famous compositions. He'd practiced it thousands of times, perfecting every note, every phrase, every breath. And when he played it in Miles's living room, it was technically perfect. Not a single mistake. Clean tone, perfect intonation, textbook phrasing. When Marcus finished, he lowered his trumpet and looked at Miles with hopeful eyes, waiting for praise, for recognition, for something. Miles Davis sat in his leather chair, wearing his usual dark sunglasses, even though it was evening, and said nothing for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he lit a cigarette, took a slow drag, and spoke in that distinctive raspy voice. That was garbage. Marcus felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. I don't understand. I played it exactly like you recorded it. Every note was exactly, Miles interrupted. You played it exactly like I recorded it. 20 years ago. You know what that makes you? A copy machine. And I don't need a copy machine. I can listen to my own records. Marcus's hands were shaking. But I studied your technique, your phrasing, your... Kid, Miles said, standing up and walking to the window. Let me ask you something. Why do you play trumpet? Because I love it. Because I want to be like you. Miles turned around, and even through the dark glasses, Marcus could feel the intensity of his stare. That's your first problem. You want to be like me. You know what I wanted when I was your age? I wanted to be like Dizzy Gillespie. I tried to copy him note for note, and you know what happened? I failed. I couldn't play as fast as Dizzy, couldn't hit the high notes like him, couldn't match his technique. So what did you do? Marcus asked quietly. I stopped trying to be Dizzy. I played what I could play, the way only I could play it. And that's how I became Miles Davis, instead of a cheap imitation of Dizzy Gillespie. Miles walked closer to Marcus, and his next words were delivered with surgical precision, designed to cut deep. You're 19 years old, and you play like a 40-year-old trying to relive his glory days. You've got technical skill, sure, but you don't have a voice. You don't have anything to say. You're empty. And empty players, they never make it. You'll never be good enough playing like this. Never. Marcus felt tears burning behind his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of Miles Davis. He stood up, fumbling with his trumpet case, mumbling something about being sorry for wasting Miles's time. Where are you going? Miles asked. Home. You're right. I'm not good enough. I should probably just quit. Did I tell you to quit? Marcus stopped at the door. I said you'd never be good enough playing like this, Miles corrected. Playing like me? Playing like anyone except yourself. That's not the same thing as saying you should quit. Then what are you saying? Miles walked over to his piano and played a single note. Just one note. He held it for a long time, letting it resonate through the room. You hear that? Miles asked. It's just one note, but it's my note. The way I play it, the way I let it breathe, the way I release it. Nobody else plays a single note like that. That's what makes you good enough. Not copying me, not playing it right, playing it yours. Marcus stood at the door, torn between running away and staying to hear more. I'm going to tell you something, and you need to listen carefully, Miles continued. You've got talent, more than most kids I've heard, but talent isn't enough. Talent is just potential. What matters is what you do with it. And right now, you're wasting it, trying to be a tribute act. So, what should I do? Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Miles stubbed out his cigarette and looked directly at Marcus. Go home. Don't touch your trumpet for a month. Not one note. Just listen. Listen to everything. Jazz, classical, rock, blues, African music, Indian music, whatever you can find. Listen to the spaces between notes. Listen to what people aren't playing. And when you come back, if you come back, I want you to play me something I've never heard before. Something that's yours. Can you do that? Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak. And one more thing, Miles added as Marcus opened the door. When I said you'll never be good enough, I meant it. You'll never be good enough for people who want you to play it safe. You'll never be good enough for critics who want you to fit in a box. You'll never be good enough for audiences who want to hear the same old shit. But that's good, because those are the only people worth disappointing. Marcus walked out of that brownstone into the cold New York night, and he cried. He cried on the subway back to his tiny apartment in the Bronx. He cried as he packed his trumpet case into his closet. He cried as he called his mother in Philadelphia and told her he was thinking about quitting music. What happened? His mother asked, concerned. Miles Davis told me I'll never be good enough. There was a pause. Then his mother, a woman who'd worked 2 jobs to pay for Marcus's music lessons, said something that changed everything. Did he say you'll never be good enough? Or did he say you'll never be good enough playing someone else's music? Marcus went silent. His mother had never even met Miles Davis, but somehow she'd understood what Miles was really saying. Baby, she continued, when you were 7 years old, you made up your own songs on that little plastic trumpet we got you from the toy store. You didn't know the right way to play. When did you stop doing that? Marcus couldn't answer because he didn't know. Somewhere between childhood and Berkeley, between loving music and studying music, he'd lost that freedom. He'd learned all the rules, mastered all the techniques, and forgotten how to just play. For the next month, Marcus didn't touch his trumpet. It was the hardest thing he'd ever done. His fingers itched to play, but he followed Miles's instructions. He listened. He went to a Pakistani restaurant in Queens and sat for hours listening to the music they played. He went to a gospel church in Harlem and heard singers bend notes in ways no classical teacher would approve. He bought records from artists he'd never heard of, Fela Kuti, Ravi Shankar, Astor Piazzolla, and let their sounds wash over him. And slowly, something began to shift inside him. He started hearing music differently, not as something to be replicated, but as conversation. Each musician was saying something unique, and, for the first time, Marcus started to wonder, what did he want to say? When the month was over, Marcus pulled his trumpet out of the closet. He didn't warm up with scales or exercises. He just put the horn to his lips and played the first thing that came to mind. It was messy. It was imperfect. It was filled with hesitations and wrong notes and moments where he wasn't sure where he was going. But it was his. For the first time in years, Marcus Webb was playing his own music. He called Miles's number, hands shaking as the phone rang. Yeah, Miles answered, his raspy voice unmistakable. Mr. Davis, this is Marcus Webb. I was the student who... I know who you are. Did you do what I told you? Yes, sir. I didn't touch the trumpet for a month, and I listened to everything. And I think I'm ready to show you something new. There was a pause. Then, come by tomorrow, 8 p.m. Marcus showed up at 7:45 p.m. too nervous to be exactly on time, but too eager to be late. Miles answered the door wearing the same dark sunglasses, the same inscrutable expression. "You bring that trumpet?" Miles asked. Marcus held up his case. "Then play. No warm-up, no small talk, just play." Marcus took out his trumpet, took a deep breath, and played. What came out wasn't So What or any other Miles Davis composition. It wasn't a jazz standard or a classical piece. It was a melody Marcus had been hearing in his head for weeks, influenced by all the music he'd absorbed, but belonging to none of it. It was melancholy and hopeful, structured and free, familiar and completely new. Marcus played for maybe 3 minutes. When he finished, his heart was pounding. He'd just played his own music for his idol, and he had no idea if it was good or terrible or anywhere in between. Miles stood up from his chair and walked over to Marcus. He took off his sunglasses, something Marcus had never seen him do, and looked directly into the young man's eyes. "Now you're a musician," Miles said simply. Marcus felt something break open in his chest. "Really? Really? You still made about 100 mistakes. Your tone got shaky in the middle. You rushed some phrases, and you need to work on your breathing. But that doesn't matter, because for the first time, you played something that mattered. You played you." "What do I do now?" Marcus asked. "You practice. You experiment. You fail a lot. You get frustrated. You keep going anyway. And you never, ever try to sound like anyone except yourself, even when people tell you you're doing it wrong, especially when people tell you you're doing it wrong." Miles put his sunglasses back on. "I'm putting together a band for some small shows in the village. Need a second trumpet? You interested?" Marcus couldn't speak. He just nodded. "Good. Rehearsal is Tuesday. Don't play like me. Don't play like anyone. Just play." For the next 2 years, Marcus Webb played with Miles Davis in small clubs around New York. It was an education unlike anything Berklee had provided. Miles was demanding, critical, and occasionally brutal, but he was never cruel. Every criticism came with a purpose: to push Marcus further from imitation and closer to innovation. "That phrase was boring," Miles would say after a show. "You played it safe. Why?" "I didn't want to make a mistake." A safe mistake is still a mistake. If you're going to mess up big, mess up interesting. Miles taught Marcus to embrace dissonance, to use silence as powerfully as sound, to trust his instincts even when his training said otherwise. And slowly, Marcus developed a style that was entirely his own, a fusion of the traditional jazz he'd studied, the global music he discovered, and something indefinable that came from his own soul. In 1980, Marcus left Miles's band to form his own group. Miles encouraged it. "You can't learn anything else from me," Miles told him. "Now you need to learn from yourself." Marcus's first album, released in 1982, was called Never Good Enough, a direct reference to Miles's words. The critics were divided. Some loved its innovation. Others called it unfocused and pretentious. But Marcus didn't care. He was playing his music, and that was enough. His second album did better. His third album went gold. By his fourth album in 1986, Marcus Webb was being called one of the most innovative trumpet players of his generation. And every interview, every profile, every feature story mentioned the same thing. Miles Davis had told him he'd never be good enough, and somehow that had made all the difference. In 1995, at the age of 36, Marcus Webb won his first Grammy Award for Best Jazz Performance. Standing on the stage at Madison Square Garden, holding the golden gramophone, he thanked his mother, his band, and then he said something that confused everyone watching who didn't know the full story. "I want to thank Miles Davis for telling me I'd never be good enough, because he was right. I'll never be good enough playing someone else's music. I'll never be good enough being safe. I'll never be good enough trying to please everyone. And thank God for that." The audience applauded politely, not quite understanding. But backstage, watching on a monitor, Miles Davis smiled. Miles died 4 months after that Grammy ceremony, in September 1991. He was 65 years old. Marcus was at the funeral, along with hundreds of other musicians whose lives Miles had touched. After the service, Marcus stood in front of Miles's casket, and he did something he'd been planning for years. He took out his trumpet and played the same melody he'd played for Miles that night in 1978. His first original composition, the one that had changed everything. But he didn't play it the same way. 13 years had passed, and Marcus had grown as a musician. The melody was the same, but the interpretation was different, richer, more confident, more himself. It was proof of what Miles had always said: you never stop finding your voice. You just keep discovering new aspects of it. Among the mourners was a young woman named Sarah Chen, a 20-year-old trumpet student from San Francisco. After Marcus finished playing, she approached him nervously. "Mr. Webb, I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to ask you something. I'm a student at the San Francisco Conservatory, and I'm struggling. Everyone tells me I need to develop my own style, but I don't know how. How did you find your voice?" Marcus looked at this young woman, so full of talent and doubt, and he saw himself at 19, and he knew exactly what he needed to say. "Let me ask you something," Marcus said. "Why do you play trumpet?" "Because I want to be like you, like Miles Davis, like the greats." Marcus smiled sadly. "That's your first problem." Over the next hour, sitting in the reception hall of the funeral home, Marcus told Sarah the whole story. How Miles had destroyed him with 6 words. How he'd spent a month not playing. How he discovered his own voice by stopping trying to imitate others. "So what should I do?" Sarah asked when he finished. Marcus thought carefully before answering. He could be gentle. He could be encouraging. He could give her the kind of supportive advice most teachers gave. But that wasn't what Miles would have done, and it wasn't what Sarah needed. "Honestly, the way you're playing now, you'll never be good enough." Sarah's face fell, exactly as Marcus's had all those years ago. "But," Marcus continued, "that's only true if you keep trying to be me, or Miles, or anyone except yourself. You want to know the secret? Stop trying to be good enough. Start trying to be honest enough. Honest to who you are, what you feel, what you want to say. That's all any of us can do." Sarah left that conversation devastated. Marcus knew she would be, but he also knew that devastation was sometimes the first step toward transformation. He'd been destroyed and rebuilt, and he'd emerged stronger. 3 years later, in 1994, Marcus received a package in the mail. Inside was a CD from Sarah Chen, along with a note. "You were right. I'll never be good enough. Thank you for telling me the truth." Marcus listened to the CD. It was experimental, bold, imperfect, and completely original. Sarah had found her voice, and hearing it, Marcus understood why Miles had been so brutal with him. Not because Miles was cruel, but because Miles knew that some students needed to be broken before they could build themselves into something real. Today, Marcus Webb is 65 years old, the same age Miles was when he died. He's won 7 Grammy Awards, played with every major jazz artist of the last 40 years, and is widely considered one of the greatest trumpet players alive. But he's most proud of the students he's taught. Over 300 young musicians who've come through his private workshop in Harlem. And every single one of them, at some point in their training, has heard Marcus say the same thing Miles said to him: "You'll never be good enough playing like this." Some quit. Some get angry. But the ones who stay, the ones who push through that initial devastation and find what lies beyond it, those students become extraordinary. Because they learn the most important lesson Miles Davis ever taught: that being good enough isn't about meeting someone else's standards. It's about being brave enough to create your own. There's a plaque in Marcus Webb's studio in Harlem. It hangs on the wall where every student can see it during their lessons. The plaque has just 6 words: The same 6 words that shattered a 19-year-old boy in 1978 and ultimately made him into a master. You'll never be good enough. Miles Davis. And underneath, in smaller letters, Marcus added his own interpretation. And that's exactly the point. The story of Miles Davis and Marcus Webb reminds us that sometimes the most important thing a teacher can do isn't to build up a student's confidence, but to tear down their false certainty. That real growth often requires real discomfort. That the words "you'll never be good enough" can be either a death sentence or a liberation, depending on how you choose to hear them. Miles Davis could have been gentle with Marcus. He could have praised the technically perfect audition and sent the kid home feeling good about himself. And Marcus would have continued being a very good copy of Miles Davis, instead of becoming the first and only Marcus Webb. But Miles knew something that most teachers forget, that the goal of education isn't to make students feel good, it's to make them real. And sometimes, making someone real means destroying who they think they're supposed to be, so they can discover who they actually are. If this story of brutal honesty, painful growth, and the transformation that comes from being told you're not good enough moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this video with someone who's struggling to find their own voice in a world that wants them to copy others. Have you ever had a teacher who tore you down to build you up better? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more incredible true stories about the unconventional methods behind music's greatest legends.